Yo, what's happening, folks? It's GM Cody, and I'm doing a live stream tonight, which is kind of unusual for me by myself. But I'm going to start doing these every once in a while. I don't really have a set time yet because my schedule doesn't really allow me to do so. But I have been wanting to do one-on-one conversations with a lot of different gamers and content creators and stuff. And just recently, I've made a good friend here. And we are going to have a conversation tonight. And tonight we have a very special guest. This is Josh, the madman from Japan.
Well, today the Slam Man.
He's a Slam Man tonight. Josh is the creator of the Crown and Command podcast and YouTube channel. And if you've never checked it out, make sure to go check it out. Basically, his whole deal is everything Games Workshop from the 90s and 80s, too, I would say. So, Josh, thanks for coming on tonight. Really appreciate it.
And Cody, anytime, mate. It's a great pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your channel. I really like it. Like I said, we met recently, not so long ago.
Yeah.
I discovered you through our Discord. I found about your YouTube channel's got a wealth of excellent content on there, looking at games that I really appreciate and loved back in the day, like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. You like the art like me.
Yeah.
We just like a lot of different topics, a lot of different things that we sort of click on. We even got the same bloody shirt on, mate. Like, I've got this Joy Division thing on. You had the same bloody one on.
Yeah, this wasn't arranged, by the way. But hey, whatever. Great minds think alike, I guess.
Yeah.
But I really want to have you on tonight, Josh, because I kind of, one thing I really like about your podcast and your YouTube channel is that you share other people's stories. And I love hearing other people's stories about how they get into gaming. But I don't think I've ever heard your complete story. I've heard bits and pieces of it, when you're interviewing people. But tonight I really wanted to bring you on, and I want to have you on more in the future, of course. And we were talking about that. But tonight I really want to just focus on you, and I want to talk about your origin story. So how did you get started in this delightful hobby?
Great question, Cody. And I love a good origin story, as you know. And I really enjoyed yours on my live stream last week. So people should go check that out if you haven't heard it or you haven't seen Cody's video on the. You did one that was supposed to be about AD&D, but it turned into your origin story.
Yeah.
Which is great. It was really good. So yeah, please go and check that out and listen to Cody's story. But my story is kind of similar, I guess. I sort of stumbled into miniature tabletop gaming through HeroQuest. That was kind of my first contact with anything to do with miniatures, anything to do with like I liked games, like card games. My mum got me like Stratego, which was, very much a strategy game. You had like these little castle type shaped pips on the board, and you'd move those around, and you had like 3 bombs, and when you hit the bomb, you'd explode. And so that was kind of, I like Monopoly. I like games generally, and computer games also, but I wasn't fortunate enough to get a decent computer. I had an Amstrad CPC 464. For any of those grognards out there, you can remember those bloody horrible things with a tape deck. You put the tape in and all that kind of stuff. But I was always fascinated with games generally, and painting like model Tamiya kits and that kind of thing when I was younger, and loving the dioramas in those catalogs in Tamiya at the age of about 15 or so. And later, a couple of years later, they had these advertisements on TV in Australia about HeroQuest. These really, you may have seen them, but they're from the late 80s, I think, probably 89 or something like that. And the broadsword, that kind of thing. If you listen to the Bard and his channel, he gives this whole, why is HeroQuest so great? And he tells you why. And that's why what it was like these quirky, corny TV ads with this board game with all this, the stereotypical heroes, the barbarian, elf, dwarf, and the mage, and they would battle all these monsters in this dungeon.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my foray into the, if you like, a board game, tabletop miniature game.
So so you picked up HeroQuest first. Where did you like go and get that by yourself at a toy store or something? Or did you bug your parents about it and they got it for you for Christmas? Or how did you get your copy of HeroQuest?
My mother was very kind enough to buy me the base set, and then the 2 expansions at the same time. I was Return of the Witch
Wow.
Lord and Keller's
Yeah.
Keep.
Very cool.
And I remember and at that stage, when you open the box, and I'd never seen miniatures before,
Mhm.
these plastic, beautiful miniatures. I still got them. I don't have the original ones I bought. I had to rebuy it, but they're just beautiful. They still hold up today as hard plastic miniatures, really characterful. And they had a thing you could send away to Games Workshop in the UK for a paint guide and a catalog. And
Yeah.
at that stage, it was like $10. I remember my father being really upset about it, saying that was $10. I got to pay like a return envelope thing for it and all that kind of stuff. But it was really worth it because when I got that back, it just opened up this entire world of Games Workshop products and
Right.
painting, of course, how to paint the miniatures and everything like that. So I was so blown away. I think when you talked about when you first saw the catalog or the White Dwarf that kid was in school with,
Yeah.
and you couldn't stop thinking about it. It was kind of like the same for me. I was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
I became very obsessed with it. And the very first thing when you opened the catalog was Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition. So it was basically taking the same kind of imagery on the board game of HeroQuest, but then making them into ranked units and fighting big battles on tables in the sort of castles. And they had like the Warhammer Armies book and the Siege book and all that kind of stuff. And that was the very first contact I saw, and I thought, that's it. That just connected and resonated with me big time. I think maybe it was because of the Hobbit, because my grandmother had a copy of the Hobbit. This is about a year or so before this.
Yeah.
And reading about the big battles of the dwarves, because I had some kind of preconception of what fantasy stereotypes were,
Right.
the archetype kind of thing,
Yeah.
So that sort of just joined that, and I thought, okay, well, this is just like the Hobbit, and then it's just basically playing these big battles on tables and stuff like that. So my grandmother reluctantly bought me the 3rd edition rule book from the comic store.
Very cool.
And she was very much against it because she thought it was all about war. And my grandparents were Dutch.
Yeah.
And they lived through the Second World War. So their ideas about, battle and war and if you like glorifying or trying to represent it or simulate it was not something that they were very happy about. But she could see that I was really enjoying it and I really loved it. And so that's really where my basis starts from that kind of thing, from 3rd edition Fantasy Battle book. Never really got to play it.
Yeah.
Never had the miniatures, never really had a lot of stuff.
How old were you when all this happened?
About 17, I think.
Oh, okay.
18.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in my last year of high school.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my friend's place, Kurt's house. My parents dropping me off, and then I think maybe I was driving then. I can't remember, but we played with 2 Norwegian guys I met at school. We played through the entire HeroQuest base set, all the expansions together as a group, and it was just the best memory of gaming. Totally, that was my favorite memories. Going to Burger King, getting some burgers, playing HeroQuest, all that kind of stuff. It was really nice. It was a good time to be in the hobby and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep. So that's where it sort of started. I looked at the side of the box of HeroQuest, saw these beautifully painted models, and I thought, wow, this is something on a total different level to Tamiya, because I was always looking at Tamiya kits and that kind of thing. The Japanese were very talented in painting these beautiful dioramas, but this was just another level up. Then I learned about Mike McVeigh, and they had the painting guide. And then it sort of gave me the basis of how to, clean, prep, prime, and then paint miniatures. I found Citadel paints at the comic store, those beautiful Bob Naismith covered box sets. Maybe you remember those, Cody, back in the day. Just so cool with the golden demon on the front of it. And
they're awesome.
I bought proper artist brushes. My mother's an artist, so she had a lot of stuff there that I could use and that kind of thing. And that sort of got me on my way to start painting. And of course, I made some horrendous efforts early on and melted the plastic in methylated spirits and all that kind of stuff. I've been there, done it all. and then came out through the other side, learning a lot more as I went. And then because that in those days, no one was doing what I was doing. Maybe it was the same for you. Maybe other people can relate to that. It was a very isolated experience because there wasn't a friend or there wasn't a group that I could go to say, hey, how do you do this stuff? How do you paint miniatures? So it was basically very much a self-learning process. And I destroyed and sacrificed a lot of miniatures along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, it was there were groups here playing Warhammer when I was a kid, but the problem was that I was a kid and that they were older guys. And so if I was older, I probably would have had more opportunities to learn how to paint and do all that. But, they wouldn't give me the time of day to show me anything. So thus, I kind of had to go through the same process. I just kind of had to teach myself, and I'm still teaching myself, right? Like I'm still figuring it out. 30
you never
years.
stop learning, mate. You never stop learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like in any discipline, like your guitars, I can see all you're a musician and that kind of thing. You always never stop learning. You're always learning something new, or you're unlocking something, or finding some other technique, or you're following some kind of trend or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the beauty of any discipline. Is that is it? You're always looking for something new to learn, or that kind of thing, or trying to push yourself personally. So with my painting, I started off really bad, but I really wanted to get good. I really wanted to get much better and paint like the heavy metal. I'm heavy lead. The heavy metal pages and that kind of thing. I really wanted to emulate those paint styles and that kind of thing, but I had no idea how they were doing it. It seemed like a real mystery.
Yeah.
So just a lot of perseverance, patience, and then just painting. I've got the 4th edition box set of Fantasy, which is my favorite box set.
And you got that when it first came out?
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was basically because of the format of those box sets. You got everything. You got 2 armies. You've got terrain, you got painting guides, you got the rule books, you got the bestiary and all that kind of thing. It was a very self-contained set.
Yeah.
So instead of me, like with 3rd edition, you pick up the book and then you're just sort of scrambling, trying to find what do I get next? What do I need? It just provided everything for you. And I think that was the beauty of 4th edition. And that sort of set a template, not only for Games Workshop, but for other companies to follow. And they're still doing it now. And it gives you everything in the box. And High Elves was the army I wanted to choose to paint. And I gave my goblins to a friend at school, which I don't think he ever painted. So that was a gamble that didn't pay off.
Right.
Then I really started learning how to paint by painting plastic monopose miniatures. It was that sort of rinse and repeat. Try to do everything neatly, do the black lining. So I wasn't blending. I wasn't doing any shading, nothing fancy. It was just blocking in colors.
Right.
I couldn't paint white to save my life.
Yeah.
So I looked at the front cover of the 4th edition book from the master Jeff Taylor, and I thought, okay, they're all blue. So I'll just paint them all blue. So that's what I did. So I did like a sort of a Lothran Sea Guard type army.
Yeah.
And that sort of just worked for me, for my skill level. I could just be happy and do that. So I did that. And they look nice. They look nice and clean. I know someone's got that now, and I don't know if he still has it because I sold it years and years and years ago. I don't know if I know he had it. He brought it back out many years later. So I know he had it then. I don't know if he's still got it now. I hope he does.
I hope he does too. I was about to ask you what happened to those miniatures, but hopefully they're still around and being used, or at least appreciated.
Yeah, I hope so.
Do you have any do you have anything from back then? Like any of your first miniatures or anything?
The only thing I have is one of the 4 Marauder Dwarf Thunderers that I bought and painted.
Yeah.
And it was a set of 4 miniatures. And at the comic store, they actually had a Marauder miniature stand, of all things.
Oh, wow.
I bought my very first metal miniatures from that stand. And it was 4 Thunderers, 4 Troll Slayers, and an Ogre from Marauder Miniatures. And I painted those dwarves when I was in high school, last year of high school. I was basically getting prepared to enter a graphic design course through TAFE College.
Yeah.
And I went to a photo studio. My mum was very supportive of my of my creative side. You know, my father wasn't all that interested in what I was doing, but my mother really liked she knew that I enjoyed what I was doing, and I wanted to pursue it as a serious thing.
Yeah.
So we took the miniatures that I painted down to the photo studio, and they took photos for me to put it into my portfolio.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, but I don't think the people who were looking at my portfolio took it with any seriousness. I thought they just thought it was a bit of a joke or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyhow, one of those miniatures my mother still has, and I posted it up on my community section of my channel about 3 weeks ago or something like that, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So you'll see it on there if you scroll through. If you're a subscriber or whatever, if you see through if you look through the community section. I don't know what it's like when you're not you'll find it. It's on there somewhere.
Yeah.
You'll find a picture of a Thunderer, and that's my oldest painted model that I have.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
Well, my mum has it, so she's still got it in her printer's drawer, because printer's drawers were a thing that I don't know whether it originated in the Netherlands or something, but they'd get printer drawers and they'd put them on the wall, and she would stick. She liked miniature things too. She would have all these little miniature houses or animals or things like little bottles of Coca-Cola and stuff like that, and she'll stick it in this thing on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in there. So I asked her the other day. I said, "Mum, you still got that dwarf model?" She said, "Yeah, it's still there." I said, "Oh, that's good." So
that's awesome.
I'm happy she's still got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Those monopose models, I think that was probably the perfect start, right? Yeah. And I started the same way, because I started kind of a generation after you did, but it was still monopose plastic models that I started with pretty much. And I think those are were a perfect start for somebody just learning how to paint, because they looked great, in my opinion. I think they look great. They weren't overly detailed. They were slightly exaggerated. And so, like those models, even today, I think are a great way for somebody to learn how to paint. It's just perfect, big, smooth areas. It's got plenty of detail, but it's not overly detailed. And so like, I think that was a perfect way to start painting, as opposed to today, like somebody getting into the hobby today and they buy new miniatures and they're beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but man, I can see why a lot of people don't have their armies painted when they're first getting into the hobby nowadays, or have any miniatures painted, because it's intimidating. That's an extremely intimidating thing. But anyways, back to the story. So you got the 4th edition box set. You're starting to learn how to paint. You're taking it pretty seriously at this point. So who did you start playing? Did you start actually playing games at this point? And who did you start playing with?
That's a good question. Now, this is back a long, long time ago. So my friend Chris and I got together. We met at I think we met at a games club, or somehow we found each other. He's my oldest and best friend in Australia. Really good guy. And recently we reconnected, actually, which is really lovely. We got together, and I went to his house, and Shane was another guy who was there too. And I remember them playing Space Crusade, the Milton Bradley game, and watching them play. And we dabbled in a bit of cyberpunk role play. There you go, Cody. Bit of role play for you.
Well, I was about to ask if you did any role playing back then.
I remember playing AD&D 2nd edition with Kurt and the guys who played Hero Quest with. They wanted to evolve it into a role playing thing, so we did that for a little bit. I bought the red box. Is it a red box? The starter set?
Yeah, the BX or
I don't know, mate.
It's the basic set by.
I think it's the basic set.
Yeah, and the cover is by Larry Elmore.
Right, beautiful cover. Yeah,
beautiful cover with the big barbarian dude facing off against the red dragon. Classic cover, classic box set, and a perfect way. Even to this day, I think that was probably the best introduction box for any role-playing game. Like, it was just fantastic introduction to D&D or anything. Even to this day, I would still like give that to like a young kid and be like, here you go. This is a perfect entry point into the hobby. So yeah. So you played a little BECME, and then you played some AD&D Second Edition.
Played 18 second edition because we had the books. I think I bought the handbook, the player's handbook at that time.
Yeah.
And I bought the Dragonlance miniature set from Ral Partha.
Excellent. Yeah.
And I painted the miniatures for that. And they're really nice miniatures. Even today, I think they're pretty cool. I think Raceland was like awesome.
I love those old Ral Partha sculpts. I still collect them.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
Yeah, they still hold up, mate. They're really good. They're really good miniatures. And so we dabbled a little bit in that, but it just didn't. The theater of the mind just didn't really do it for me, I've got to admit.
Right.
And I like the Hero Quest was like a 3-dimensional role play, but very, very basic, very simple.
Yeah.
I kind of like that approach more than the real nuts and bolts of a role playing system. But I did a little bit of that. We did a bit of Cyberpunk. That was fun.
Yep.
I think we did one session of that. I think that was it. I wasn't many other, but I got those guys into Games Workshop. Basically, I got Chris and Shane into Games Workshop. Shane got into it pretty heavily. He kind of liked 4th edition. He bought a lot of Empire models because he had the money. He had the money. Like, he was a lot older than me, and all the guys around me were a lot older. Same as you, Cody. You know, so I was the youngest kid. Well, I was like 18 or something like that. They were like in their mid-20s, late 20s or so.
Yeah.
So they had the expendable income, and Shane at the time just bought a whole heap of stuff. And at that, I was painting my high elves. Chris didn't paint anything. He wasn't so into the fantasy side of things, but he used to come around and play. And then Battle Masters came out. So when Battle Masters came out, we just bought like 4 sets each.
Just for the miniatures.
Just for the miniatures, yeah. It was on a clearance sale or whatever. And so so Shane built up this massive Empire army out of that. So I remember playing at his house usually every week. I used to call him up and say, "Hey Shane, let's go and play." Okay. So so we used to play fantasy there. I got my ass kicked all the time. Didn't know how to play. It was just hopeless, because I just brought whatever stuff I had. I just had spearmen, archers, maybe a bolt thrower, maybe 2 of those, I think. I had Eltharion, I had Teclis, and I think that was pretty much it. Maybe some sword masters, I think, as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty light. And compared to what he had just access to everything because he had the money. He could just buy anything he wanted.
Right.
So I just got my ass handed to me every single time. But we had fun. I remember I like those memories. I enjoy reminiscing about that time. But then me and Chris, I bought the Space Marine, Epic Space Marine box set, the blue one. So it's the 2nd edition. And because Chris wasn't really interested in the fantasy, he couldn't afford the miniatures, and I really couldn't afford the miniatures either, really, to make units and stuff like that. So I said, let's play Epic. So, and the beauty of Epic was it's the same sort of format. You got 3 armies in there. You got the terrain. You had everything you can think of. It's all contained in one set. And the beauty of that was the armies were quick to paint. Everything was in plastic, mostly. And the game rules were fantastic. So much fun.
Yeah.
So we got really into Epic Space Marine. We bought the expansions. I got into Chaos. He got into Orcs and Eldar. And I had Blood Angel Marines. And we just played that exclusively, really, for a good year or so, I think. And,
so did he have like a proper War Games table?
No, we did Floorhammer, mate. Floorhammer. That was it. Yeah, it was Floorhammer, and then later we got a tennis table. Table.
Yeah.
But yeah, I bought one of those. That was the rage back then because all War Gamers had one. It was just one you could put in your garage and that kind of thing. But I used to just play straight on the floor. And those days I was young. I was able and physically able to sit on the floor for prolonged lengths of time. But now I can't do it. Me and Chris still have fond memories about Epic, and he still thinks it's the best game Games Workshop ever made. I think it's the best game they ever made, personally. Chris then started basically making molds and casting his own miniatures at home because, again, it was like a financial thing, and the availability wasn't so great. And we had to drive all the way up to Brisbane where we were to get all the stuff at the shop, and I just hope it was there. So he used
Yeah.
to cast up all the miniatures and make all these battle tanks and stuff like that for his orcs and Eldar and everything like that. And they were great. They were very serviceable. And we just played that forever until I left to go to the UK with the opportunity to hopefully get a job at Games Workshop.
So this is the next part of the story. You go into the UK, and did you have aspirations for working for Games Workshop, or how did that come about with you doing that? Because that's a pretty big leap because from what I understand, you kind of lived in the sticks of Australia. And I mean, pretty much, that's what we call it here, the sticks, right? And you went to the UK. So how did that come about?
So I'll introduce another friend, Marcus, a really good friend of mine, another long life friend of mine. Great guy. He's the head of Wereweevil Miniatures now. I don't know if anybody's heard of them, but Wereweevil Miniatures. He's now a sculptor and does great stuff in 28 mil, all that kind of stuff. But when I met Marcus, and it was basically during the day, and maybe you guys had the same, but you go to your game store and they had like a notice board, and then someone would get like a note and write, anyone want to play fantasy, call me, and then they'll write their name and their phone number.
Yeah, totally.
Probably some dodgy bastard. You don't have no idea. Probably some
Sometimes it was sometimes it panned out, and then most of the time it was it could get sketchy.
Yeah, you get sketchy. You got some real weirdos in the hobby, unfortunately, but luckily I called Marcus because I saw his. Someone said they knew him and he was a fantastic painter, and he worked for Games Workshop and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. I thought, oh, cool, I've got to meet this guy. And he actually lived on the Gold Coast where I was.
Right.
So I still remember going to his house, driving down there. He was sharing a house with somebody, meeting up with Marcus, and he showed me his collection, beautifully painted high elves, and he was big into Eldar for 40K second edition, massively into second edition and Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
So his collections were just so big because he worked for Games Workshop in the UK.
Right.
And of course, at that time, it was 50% off for staffers. So he just went nuts and he just bought a whole stack of stuff. Pretty much every 40K army you can think of for second edition, like Orcs, Space Marines, Eldar, Chaos, Imperial Guard. I don't know. I'm not sure if he had Imperial Guard, but he pretty much had those 4 or 5 armies. And so I met him, and then he said, "Yeah, I'm going to go back over to the UK." He was an artist, like he was drawing a lot at that stage, and I think he wanted to meet his father there, and then maybe try to get a job as an illustrator at Games Workshop.
Yeah.
And my intention was, get into retail, basically, get anything I could get. So Bradley, another guy that I didn't know, came with us now, a good friend of mine, of course, and Marcus went to the UK, and I think this is in 1995. I always thought it was 1994, but I think it's 1995 we went over.
Yeah.
And we landed in London, and we stayed at some place that those guys knew somebody there in a shared flat. It was called a flat, like an apartment.
Yeah.
And basically it was like there was no beds. It's like you want a mattress, you need to go down the road and find one because what they used to do, people would take all their rubbish, all the stuff they don't want, and they'll go out to the front footpath and just throw it onto the footpath.
Right.
And then at some point a truck would come through the week and pick it up and stick it on the truck and take it away. So we would find mattresses left on the ground outside. Someone's probably died on one of them, I don't know, or pissed themselves on it or whatever, vomit all over it. I don't care. We just grabbed one and we put it on.
You were young. It was fine.
Yeah. And of course, all the guys who were living there, they're all Kiwis, and there's a South African guy and a couple of Aussies, and of course they're just doing dope, and it was just a party house. You know what I mean? That's what a lot of Aussies went there for, just to get into the drugs and the scene, and they're all young and they're all there's pubs everywhere, and they're just out doing wild stuff or working or whatever. And us 3 nerds were just sitting there trying to survive, this strange kind of life. I've never lived out of home. I've didn't know what to expect. I didn't, I had no sort of survival skills outside of living out of my own home. So that was a big eye-opening thing. And this is, of course, the time when there's pre-internet, pre-smartphones. So the only way you could contact your family was either by calling them, an international call, or sending them a letter. So I'm still amazed my parents let me go at that stage, because they know. Oh, hang on, the screaming bells going off in the background. You probably hear that. But yeah, I eventually found we eventually moved out of that place and moved into another place, which was even worse. It was just crazy. I could tell you a whole story, many stories about that place, but it was again a party house. Heaps of New Zealand little Kiwis there, and they were growing dope outside. Some guy was counterfeiting money in the garage. There was the couple upstairs who would like spit at each other and just verbally abuse each other, like scream at each other.
Wow.
We had another guy, American guy, really nice guy, lovely guy. He was married to a beautiful Japanese tall lady, and he was a writer or whatever. And yeah, you can just imagine all these characters in this house, and it was just like every night loud music. It was getting pissed and stoned, and it was just like a circus. And it's just us three nerds in our room playing Necromunda and sharing the they had like this makeup table. I don't know what you call it, but where a woman would put her makeup on, and it's like a mirror and that kind of thing. We would take turns sharing that space to paint miniatures and stuff like that.
Wow.
Because I'm sort of skipping a little bit further, but I eventually got a job at Games Workshop in retail.
Yeah.
And then started working there, and then the guys would come to the store. I worked at Oxford Street store in London, it's basically their flag store store that a lot of tourists would come to buy their stuff. So here we are, three nerds in a party house full of just craziness going around us. I don't know how we survived it. I think I could never do that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, back then it seemed the only way to do it. And I would commute by train, by the tube to work every day. And the other guys were into traveling. They would go and work somewhere, save up their money, and they would go to Egypt, America, you name it. They would just travel everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They had a really good time, actually. And I was just always working. And so I eventually moved out of there. And I moved into a customer's house, like one of the customers at our store. I asked him if he had a room to let, and he said, yeah, you can live with us. So I lived with him for a bit as well. And then eventually what they do at Games Workshop, like the new blood that comes in, they're like super hyper, super, really into Games Workshop. Yeah, like really high on Games Workshop. And once you've been there for quite a while, you sort of your mood or your temperament sort of settles, and you sort of get into the groove of working there and the day-to-day routine and stuff like that. So we were all burnt out basically. So they moved us off into different stores.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I moved out to Luton, which is which I hear from my English friends is like the arse end of England. And
I've never even heard of it, so yeah, it must be.
You don't want to go there, mate, honestly. And when I went there, it was a really nice guy. He was a manager, a really lovely guy, heart of gold. He's a really nice bloke. Anyhow, he got the sack because what happened was no one would come to the store. There was no one there. There was just it was a pretty average kind of place. They had like an airport. I think that was probably the most significant feature of the entire city.
Yeah.
So if they weren't making budgets, the managers would get shoved off, and they would go into assistant manager, or they get fired or whatever. So what actually happened was, and I came from a culture working in Oxford Street where we would play loud music. We were just idiots, we were just nutcases. We were because this is the time of like LSD, not LSD. I'm sorry, ease, ecstasy, big and rave parties and that kind of thing. So I used to go out we didn't game or anything. We didn't do anything like that. I wasn't gaming at all. I was out getting drunk every day. We'd go to because in England, of course, it's a pub culture, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Rabbitohs. Sorry, mate. Sorry for missing your beautiful city. I'd love to go there once again and then take another look. I didn't really look at your city much. I was just going from home to work kind of thing. But I heard from other people it was they sort of talked about it that way. But anyhow, what was I up to? Oh, that's right. I came from a culture from the city where we would just go wild, and we would go to the pub every night and stagger home. I would be so drunk I wouldn't remember getting home, often. And that was kind of the English way of life. That was what everyone did. And so I went to I went to Luton, and I sort of carried that kind of same culture to them. Those poor buggers. They were like these young guys, probably living with their mothers or something at home, and I was like introducing them to like drugs and like wild music and stuff like that. We'd have the music right up loud, and of course there was no manager. So it was managerless. So we were just doing whatever we wanted,
Just crank it up in the store.
Yeah. Like we were doing, like, and we were taking the piss out of the guy, like customers, like that. This fucking knobhead, he's a wanker and all this kind of stuff. Like we were just nuts, mate. No one would employ us, honestly. Anyhow, this guy came in one day. He was an Irish guy, and he put his case onto the table, and the music was blaring at this stage, and we were sort of like dancing. Hey mate, how you going? The register, and he goes, hey, how you going, mate? I want you to have a look at my Space Wolf Army, and I said, okay, yeah, sure, mate, yeah, let's have a look. And he goes, oh, by the way, I'm the new manager.
Oh shit!
And I said, oh, so the music got turned off. It's like one of those like westerns, like someone walking into the saloon. Everything just went dead quiet, and everyone didn't say anything. And this guy was like a hard ass guy coming into stores to basically shape it up or ship out the staff.
Yeah.
So we were shitting bricks basically, because this guy was coming in to just like get rid of all of us and take it over and start it all over again. So he just said to this guy, he said, if you can't vacuum clean this floor, I'm going to sack you. This is your last day. That was his kind of attitude. He was a nutcase, right?
Yeah.
Maybe ex-IRA, I don't know. But anyhow, and he came in, and we were just shitting ourselves, and it was just a terrible atmosphere. Like it just, it was just awful. But we got through it. I got on his good side. And I think one of the other guys left, and it was a totally different atmosphere. Anyhow, at that stage, one of the guys found a internal memo from the studio saying that they're looking for new heavy metal painters, and if anybody in the stores would want to try out, you could apply. And one of the guys said, "Hey, Josh, you should apply for that." And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not that standard." But he said, "Oh yeah, you should have a go." I said, "Oh yeah, why not? Well, it won't hurt." So I sent away for an application, and I got one back saying, "Yep, please come up to Nottingham for like a orientation or whatever."
Yeah.
So I went up there, and I stayed in the sort of the company house for the night.
Right.
And with me was John Wigley. John Wigley is one of the artists for Games Workshop who stayed there for quite a long time. He's a great guy. And I still remember going out for a curry and a beer with him, and going home. And in that flat, he took his PlayStation 1. And I was just dreaming about getting a PlayStation, and playing FIFA. We played FIFA. I love football. I love English football and that kind of thing. So we would sit there and play FIFA all night, and he would kick my ass playing England against Australia. And then the next day we went to the studio, and I was like, wow, I reached Mecca. This is it, mate. This is the holy land. Yeah. This is the greatest place ever. Like, you get to see the cabinets with all the miniatures in it. And, I was just drooling over that. And you get to meet all the artists. I met let's see, Wayne England, beautiful, like fabulous guy, fantastic guy. So open, so welcoming, so, so warm. And anytime you come and see me, I'll help you out with anything, great guy. I met Mike McVeigh. Mike McVeigh is very reserved and very shy. Didn't really talk to him much at all. I met Jez Goodwin, great guy, chain smoker, just sitting there smoking, looking out the window, looking at people walking by. Wasn't really interested in the miniatures or me or whatever, but just, and Nigel Stillman, of course, fantastic guy. A lot of great memories of Nigel, very eccentric individual. Rick Priestley, Andy Chambers, you name it. You can string them all off, and I've
Yeah.
sort of had some kind of contact or something with them. And then Simon, who was the studio manager then at that stage, he gave me a Phoenix Guard miniature, one of the high elves, to paint for the day. And he said, "Yeah, you're going to sit there, there's your table, there's your paints and everything. Like, you paint that miniature, when you finish, come bring it back." So of course, before that, this is the funniest thing, I brought my case of miniatures that I painted in England. And and for me, I wasn't a great painter. I wasn't their level. I wasn't a bad painter.
Yeah.
But I wasn't their level. You know what I mean? I was sort of like, subpar painter. Like, I could paint models, but I wasn't really, really good. And the idea of heavy metal was, if you won Golden Demon, well,
Right.
you would be like a competition painter. You would have rights to work at heavy metal. Basically, that's how they sort of structured everything. So you would have to be pretty good to get in there. And I think they're probably just desperate to get someone in there to paint stuff or whatever. I don't know. So I open up my Citadel case, a black case,
Yeah.
and they're just looking at it thinking, oh, like, this is just shit. Who is this guy? This is garbage. I can just remember I was just feeling so deflated, thinking, oh God, I'm not going to get this job. They just think this is garbage and crap, and I can't paint, and they were just thinking this is not very good. But anyhow, I got the gig. I did the miniature. I painted it. Simon was like, "Yeah, that's pretty good. And you got the job," and that was it. So I got in. Yeah, that was, like I said, they must have been desperate at the time. They must, because the wages were so low, and the salary was so low. Like, if you work in the store, like, my base salary at the store was this much, but the heavy metal team was lower than the store, like a red shirt's wage.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
So I was getting paid more than Torben Schnorr. Now, Torben is, I think he's from Finland. Or Denmark. I think he's Danish, actually, and he's a brilliant painter.
Yeah.
Amazing fucking painter, right? And like, he was sleeping on the floor on a mattress in his apartment.
That's crazy.
And he was just getting paid shit all. Like, they were just, you entered the studio with the mindset that you have to do it to love it, and you have to be really super passionate. You got to be just like the yes man kind of thing,
Yeah.
So you had that kind of, you were seduced into this kind of thing. Of course, any opportunity to work for heavy metal, man, you would just rip someone's hand off for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was like, I definitely want to do it, and I set myself up there. I moved into a house. Again, this is another big mistake. Again, drug dealers. I was moving into a house with drug dealers, living downstairs. They're all smoking pot all the time. I had another group of them. There was like a group of flats, and all these different people were living on different floors of this flat. And I lived down the bottom there. And there was a woman who lived at the very top, a very well endowed lady. I think she might have been in her mid 30s or early 40s or something at that stage. Wow. And then this guy would come around every now and again, sort of, a bit of a wild looking dude, tats everywhere and that kind of stuff, and a biker's jacket and stuff like that. And he would see me painting miniatures at the table, and he goes, "Hey, is that Games Workshop Warhammer?" I said, "Yeah, mate, that's right." And he goes, "Oh, I used to play in a band for Warhammer Records. He used to play in Wraith."
Oh, no shit. Wow. Yeah. That's funny.
This is in Nottingham. So Nottingham, that everyone knew each other in, like, there was, and I was like, oh wow, okay. I never listened to Wraith. I still haven't listened to it. It's probably absolute shit.
It's not.
Bolt Thrower was good. Bolt Thrower was great, but Wraith and all those other bands, I don't know much about them. But I thought that was a bit of a spin out.
That's funny.
But yeah, that lasted for about 4 months working there, and I don't know why I left exactly. And I we can go into details about that later. There's lots of stories I could probably share about that kind of thing, my time at Games Workshop and working in the studio. But that's pretty much a very brief overview of how I got there. And then it was just basically me not looking after myself. I don't think I ate dinner for like weeks, if not months at a time. You know what I mean? Wow. Like, I didn't have to look after myself. I had no car. I had no sort of support network there. Yeah. So I only went to the supermarket once, I think, when I was there. And I used to live off lunches off the lunch car that came to the studio. I'd buy like a sandwich or something, eat that, I was smoking a lot.
Yeah.
To smoking heavily, and I looked sick. I was really skinny, white, pale, very
Yeah.
pale. So I just wasn't I was very young. I didn't know much about how to function in life. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if I had someone to nurture, because just near to us where I was living were all the White Dwarf studio guys living in one big flat there. If I maybe joined up with someone else, or someone took me under the wing and said, hey, come and live with me, whatever, I think it would have been okay, and I would have stayed there for a long time.
Right.
But as it was, I just thought I thought maybe if I just keep doing this, I don't think I'll probably live for very long, living off cigarettes and sandwiches from the truck shop or whatever. And of course, we're doing lots of drugs and stuff there as well. And, so as you do when you're young.
Yep.
But wild time, really fun. I'll never forget those memories. They were great. And the people I met were great too. I still have a lot of contact with those guys now.
Yeah.
The guys I met through the store. And really, really nice guys. And I now found out Dave Perry, who's a heavy metal painter, when I was working there. He also lives in Japan. He's been living for about 20 years. So I met up with him for the first time last year for a few beers. And so we've now back in contact again, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, Dave was a funny fucker. Like, he basically didn't want to do anything. This is basically, I think he got a job at heavy metal when he was about 16, right? He never worked a real job in his life. So what he used to do, he would sit there with because he was obsessed with Lord of the Rings. So he'd have like this huge Lord of the Rings book on his lap.
Yeah.
And he'd just sit there reading it like that and didn't do anything. He didn't do any painting. He just wasn't interested in it. And they'll all skype up for a cigarette or whatever, and they just try to get out of anything they could. I think they're just being too long doing it, and they just got sick and tired of it. And I think most of those guys, I think after I left, I think Dave went off to work for Harlequin Miniatures as a sculptor, because he was like an aspiring sculptor at that time. He couldn't get into the Citadel team, so I think he left Games Workshop altogether and went on his own way, and obviously went to uni later and came to Japan after that, and gave up on his dreams of becoming a sculptor or something or whatever. But lots of great characters, lots of good people there. You know what I mean? And there were some people who weren't so nice too. I've got to admit, at the studio, there's a few people I would never have on the podcast ever again. And if I probably met one of those people, I'll probably headbutt them, I'd say.
Wow. Yeah. So how many people were employed, like, just in the heavy metal studio?
So there was myself, there was Dave Perry, Torben Schnorr, Mark Jones, Paul Muller. Paul Muller's an amazing painter.
Yeah.
And Neil Hodgson. Neil Hodgson was like the team leader of our group.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, when you think that when you join heavy metal, you think you're just going to paint all the great models and you'd have a choice of everything. It's not that case. It's not that at all. Basically, I was given the task of making movement trays.
Okay.
That was my very first job at working the heavy metal team. So making movement trays, I had to liaise with Jervis Johnson about which units he wanted, how big the movement trays were, and Owen Branham would show me where the drop saw was, the MDF, and I would cut and make these movement trays for the studio.
Yeah.
For all their battle reports and stuff like that, because I think even before then they weren't using movement trays at all. I think they were just moving the miniatures one at a time.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think so.
Yeah.
Like real old school. I mean, we're talking about really old school style,
Yeah.
And then I think they caught onto the idea of movement trays, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we need movement trays," and that kind of thing. So I did all that, and then I went into like making conversions. And they said, "Okay, we've got," because I think Dark Elves were being produced at that time, and the Wood Elf book was getting made at that time, and the guys were painting the Wood Elves for the 4th edition army book. So they said, look, we need champions, or we need distinctive characters for these units. So here are the bits, because they had like this room next to the studio. So you walk in there and they had like all these bins, and in the bins were just bits of everything. Wow. So it was like a smorgasbord of metal, and you can just get anything you wanted. And and it was great. So you can just go through there and paints and everything you wanted was there, you know.
That's cool.
So there's still pictures in the 5th edition Warhammer book of my conversions and stuff like that I did there. So I've got a little bit of, a very small slice of history captured in those photos in the books and stuff, which is nice. It's nice to look back on those kind of things because I did enjoy doing that time. It was very exciting.
Yeah.
And then trying to match my paint job to the original models, that kind of thing, trying to match them up.
Well, I'm assuming your painting probably rose to another level, right? Hanging around those guys.
Yeah, it did. My painting got a lot better because I was painting every day for eight hours a day. I'd stay back if I need to. I paint on the weekends. And then if you do that and if you're in that environment and you're looking at other guys painting too, look at Paul Moller's stuff. He is just an amazing painter. And everyone had a different sort of style, very distinctive style. And Paul especially had a very distinct style because he would put the base coats on all the miniature, like the flesh and the whatever color it was. He'd have all these artist inks and he would just drown it in inks, the whole thing. So it'd be just like the big dark blob. And then he would just build up the layers, step by step by step by step. And really interesting to see that. Torben was another fantastic painter, much like Mike McVeigh, to that sort of level. Very clean, very, very, very luminescent. Like he made the paints just glow.
Yeah.
And he got me onto using dishwashing liquid.
Oh, really?
For inks. He'd say, mix the dishwashing liquid with the inks, and that would make it, and what it really was contrast. That's really what it was. It was like the early contrast.
Yeah.
If you look at contrast paint, that's really what it is. It's like an ink mixed with a gel medium that's giving it it's congealing all the paint into those crevices and sort of alleviating the paint. It's sort of, dropping off where it's, raised and that kind of thing. So it was very much a sort of precursor to contrast paints all those days back. And I sort of brought that idea back to Australia and messed around with that. But then I started licking we were licking our brushes.
Sure. I still do that.
Yeah, with dishwashing liquid though, it's not very good. You have to So very interesting characters, very good time. It was just a great time to be part of the studio, part of Games Workshop at that time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you were there. I mean, in my opinion, you were there at like the golden age of Games Workshop, right? You were there on the heydays of Games Workshop. So it's really, I mean, that's an awesome experience, especially when you're a young person, be able to do that and being, such a big enthusiast like you were at the time, be able to experience that. That's amazing, right? I mean, that was something we all kind of dreamed and imagined about, just being there. I just wanted to go there, much less work there. So, that's incredible that you had that experience, at least, even if it was for a short time. So after the heavy metal studio, you don't know why you left? You think you just got worn out and burned out and starving to death, basically?
Probably starving to death. Like I said, I was smoking heavily, wasn't eating right, and doing silly things. And I think maybe I had this idea that I would make myself like a big name back in Australia.
Yeah.
I had this kind of idea that that I would make myself big and I work in the studio in Australia and I'd be closer to home and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's really strange. I wish I'd never left. I think I should. I wish I'd now, looking back, went through the entire, because 5th edition was coming out. We were painting the miniatures for the 5th edition set when I was there just before I left.
Right.
So if I'd stayed all the way through 5th edition and left at 6th edition, say, I'd be quite happy because I lived through the Hero Hammer and worked through the Hero Hammer era, basically, until it went into like the Middle Hammer era. So, but I think maybe I was just homesick. Maybe I just wasn't looking after myself right. And my return flight had expired, so I had to pay another ticket to get back again. So.
Oh,
what's up? We're back again.
I think. Yeah, we froze up a little bit. Well, we might have lost Josh for a moment. Hopefully he'll be back. Hope you guys are enjoying the stream. I see we got a bunch of people here that joined us. Per always is great encouragement. Oh, we got Josh back. Excellent.
We're back.
All right.
Know what happened there? Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, went back and then went for an interview in the Games Workshop studio in Sydney. Was confronted by a boardroom of absolute bastards, and they just said, "Look, the main guy there who I met in England as well, he's an absolute psychopath," and he basically said, "Okay, I want you to start tomorrow." And I said, "Well, I just got back.
Yeah.
And I can't start tomorrow. I don't even know where to live." He goes, "Well, if you're not willing to die for the Emperor and be a good space," this is what he said. This is no bullshit, mate. No bullshit. He said, "If you're not going to be a loyal spaceman to the Emperor, then we don't want you. And you're like a heretic," kind of thing. That's what he basically said to me. And I'm
Holy
like,
shit.
"Is this fucking guy for real?" And I looked at the I looked at the area, I looked at the area manager guy, who had I met before actually. I looked at him and he didn't react or he didn't say anything or whatever. And I said, "Oh, well, that's it. Then I'm going home.
Yeah.
See you later." So I'd actually met the area like the what do you call it? Not the area manager. He was basically the top guy, general manager, I think would be the right term for it. I met him before, many years before I went to England for an interview to work for Games Workshop when they first arrived in Australia.
Yeah.
And I met him. He was basically the accountant there. He was like the accountant for Games Workshop at that stage. And I met him and another guy in a hotel in Brisbane for a job working at Games Workshop in Sydney. That's where they were based. But I didn't get that job. And then that's when I went to England and tried to work over there. But that guy then became the general manager. So I was confronted with this absolute prick, and I just thought, "No, I'm not doing this." Sorry. So that was it. That was the end of my Games Workshop days, basically, 1996, around about then.
Well, so you went back to Australia. What did you do then after that?
Not much. I sort of went in between different jobs I didn't like do and that kind of thing. Worked for my father for a long time. Yeah, I didn't go back into the gaming industry. I just went and did either was unemployed or I worked for my father for a while and just sort of just went through to shitty job and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But still did painting, still gamed, still hang out with the guys, always was painting, doing stuff. So that's really, and then it was just basically a progression of different systems. I went into Rackham, the French company's miniatures, and started learning their style. And I sort of left Games Workshop for a very long time. When 6th edition came out, I sort of just went, that was it.
Yeah.
It changed too much for me to.
Hey, you froze up again. Maybe you come back. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate everybody that's come out tonight. Hopefully Josh will come back here in a minute. I don't know what's going on. He's obviously having technical issues over there. I see we got Mondo Hannon here. We got RoboDog. I saw Per in earlier. RPG Exile. Really appreciate it. And I hope you guys are enjoying the talk so far. Josh dropped out, but I'm sure he's going to try to come back here in just a second. And we'll wait a little bit. There he is.
Back again. I don't know what happened there, mate.
I don't know. You just completely froze up.
In the wiring, I think.
Yeah.
But anyhow, it might be a good chance to just to try to wrap up our live stream if that's okay for today. And then we can always come back and talk about more stuff, dude. So I really enjoyed talking to you, as I said, even though we haven't really talked much. I've been doing all the talking, but yeah, we definitely come back and do something again at some other
No, for sure. I mean, that's I kind of wanted you to just talk and explain where you come from. And, you know, my audience here, our community here doesn't know you. So I kind of wanted to get them to know you, where you come from, what you're all about. And I wanted to hear your full origin story. That was kind of the whole point of doing this. And at some point we can talk more about that, and we can have some other discussions about some other things. I know we've got hundreds of topics we can talk about. But also, you know, those that don't know, Josh has, make sure to go subscribe to Josh over at the Crown of Command on his YouTube channel. He does a lot of good stuff there. He does, it's mainly all 90s Games Workshop stuff. He does battle reports. He interviews people. He talks about all that stuff, all the classic games, Necromunda, Man of War, Warhammer Fantasy. It's a really, really good channel, and he brings a lot of passion and love to what he's doing over there. And he also has a podcast, the Crown of Command podcast. So make sure to go check that out.
Yeah, sorry, but mate, it's breaking up here. So look, let's Cody, look, thank you so much again for inviting me on. I really enjoyed this, and we're definitely going to do it again. Hopefully without the Gretchens in the wiring this time. And thank you for everybody who's joined in the chat. I see Dan Buman's there, Dan the Man, Robodog, Amondo, and Per. Thanks, guys, for coming in to say hello. But yeah, support Cody and his channel. Please like the stream for him, please, guys, and share it in the relevant groups you think people might be interested in watching something like this and his content. So the more you share, the more you like, it sort of, you know, defeats the algorithm gods in the battle in Ragnarok.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I'll let you get back to your day. I know you got a waiting kid there that wants to get out and do some
my
stuff.
little boy's peering on the corner saying, "Come on, Dad, let's go."
Yeah.
Let's get out
So
here.
have a good night, man. Thanks for joining me.
Too, mate.
And
Thank you, my
we'll
friend.
talk later.
Okay.
Peace.
All right, buddy. See you, mate.